assistance call. I planned to comment how nice the weather was in DC today. It was a nice spring day, but right before the call started, it started raining. So I think it's more like April showers. But I want to call to your attention a couple of important dates this month. Those include Autism Awareness was earlier this month, so I hope you wore your blue for Autism Awareness. There are several other observances this month, including the American Sign Language Day, which is tomorrow. There's also Jazz Appreciation this month. This month is the month of the military child. It's also National Child Abuse Prevention Month and National Occupational Therapy Month. And of course, if you celebrate, Easter is also this weekend. And I should have mentioned up front that I'm joined by my colleague, Christine Pilgrim, who will, after my announcements, go over this year's APR clarification process. As a reminder, for this year's grant applications, thank you for posting those. The Part C applications are due on May 13th, 2022, and the Part B applications are due on May 27th. There's also a new OSEP Fast Facts on students with disabilities who are English learners served under IDEA Part B. You can find this on the IDEA website. In addition, the EdFacts information collection package for 22, 23, 23, 24, 24, 25 is open for 30-day public comment until April 28th. I sent this link out to state directors yesterday. The package includes public comments on IDA Section 618 data collection, as well as proposed changes during the 60-day comment period for this collection. You can find this info on the website reginfo.gov. So that's reginfo.gov. Also, as you're moving forward, please save the date for the 2022 OSEP Leadership and Project Directors Conference, which will be held July 18th. We are very excited about this conference this year. We received many outstanding proposals, so we are excited to present those to you and have your involvement with that. The next OSEP TA call will be on our differentiated monitoring system, which will be on Thursday, April 28th at 4 p.m. The registration link for that call is available on the OSEP Ideas That Work program page. You can also check our page on Engage OSEP, that website. Now I'll turn it over to Christine, but I'll take a minute in case there are any questions on any other topics in addition to APR before I turn it over to Christine. Seems like there are no questions, so I'm going to turn it over to Christine. Christine, it's all yours.
Thanks, Al. I'm sure that they're waiting to ask me all the questions. So you get a pass on that one. They're all coming for me. Good afternoon, evening, morning, if you're somewhere off in the Pacific. But we wanted to thank you, really. I really want to start off by thanking you for all of your hard work. Everyone got their submissions in on time, which is excellent. Recognizing it's a new SPP APR package, you've worked so hard with your stakeholders to set targets for the 6 years of the SPP APR cycle. There were new requirements you had to speak to. The OSEP C11 and B17 were due February 1st, just like every other indicator, which was new this year. So you put in a lot of hard work to get everything in on time and dealing with COVID, et cetera. So just want to honor you and thank you for that. Since February 1st, my colleagues and I have been working very diligently to analyze your submissions. I have an incredible team that works with me in a data space, and truly none of the heavy lifting could happen without them. So I hope that each and every one of them know how valued and important they are to me and to the work of the team and the division and OSEP at large. So we recognize coming into this, and we've said on previous national TA calls that, you know, this submission is a full year's worth of COVID data. Your last SPP APR submission, it was the last 3 months of the fiscal year, but we knew when you were sending these in that we were going to be seeing data that was impacted by COVID for an entire year. And that's why we flagged in the SPP APR instructions and memo again this year that it was super important for you to tell us in your submissions how COVID impacted your ability to collect and report data, and any steps you took to mitigate that. As I've shared in the past, that is important not only for us to think about how to best support you moving forward, but also as we're having discussions and as we were preparing for determinations, that information you give us on the impact of data factors into our conversations about how we issue determinations, what goes into that, and the publicly available information which we're able to use that could weigh in on our decisions. Shared with you last year, I think, when we issued determinations, recognizing this was going to be a full year's worth of COVID, that we were going to make determinations in the same way that we did last year. And certainly last year, we factored in the impact of COVID when states told us specifically in those indicators what happened. So I'm glad to see that generally across the board, vast majority of you did that. And you always have the clarification period to add anything if you need to. Swati, next slide. Oh, no. Oh, yeah, that's the agenda. You can go to the next slide, though. So as the agenda mentioned, we're going to just spend today talking about some quick tips and tricks to maximize your success in the SPP APR clarification period, share some general impressions that we've seen in our initial analysis, places where you may see OSEP response that you might not have necessarily seen it before. I don't want anybody to freak out or anything like that. Just want to, share with you a little bit about our thinking in that regard. So clarification period, it opened on Tuesday for Part C. Part B is waiting with bated breath to get that email from PSC saying that it's open. It's not going to come just yet. Just stay tuned, be patient. It'll come in a few hours. I can't be 2 places at once, and I'm here with you now. Clarification runs for 2 weeks. For Part C from the 12th through the 26th, and for Part B from the 14th through the 28th. I think we've already gotten one question about, hey, since Part B hasn't come out yet, can we have an extra day? And I don't know if you ever have those moments where you think like you're turning into your parent or something, but I had that moment where I was like, oh my gosh, I remembered when we first started at OSEP, clarification was only 1 week, not 2. And it would be like 11:59 p.m. and then it would come out. We got used to them coming out earlier and that was great. But then I was having moments of thinking about, I remember when I walked uphill both ways, that kind of feeling. So just know, if you're having difficulty after Part B opens in terms of getting your submissions in, you can certainly reach out through PSC, but I have high hopes that everyone is going to be able to clarify completely in the ways that they want to within the 2 weeks allotted. Next slide, Swati. I think I'm still seeing the slide about, unless I'm stuck or frozen, around the dates for clarification. It should be like a placeholder now. No. Yay. Sure, that works. So in terms of thinking about how you prep for this period in time, and Part C has already begun, take a day or two to really read the OSEP responses. I suggest not having a clarification call like the second you get the email saying that it's open, that you take a minute to read our responses, and then you're able to huddle with your team and think about the questions you have for us, and it can be a really efficient clarification call. On the topics of calls, state leads are well positioned to support you in this clarification period. I encourage you to have clarification calls with your states, even if you think, oh my gosh, I got this. I totally know what OSEP was talking about. I can respond to this. I think it's always good to check in and make sure that you have someone there that you can touch base with. State leads are able to provide any additional information about our analysis, how we landed where we landed. They certainly have the support of other colleagues as well during those calls if they need it, but I encourage you to use them because we are available to support you. Next slide. So when you get your data rubric, which is attached in eMaps, and you open it up, those of you that have been around for a while, you know this like the back of your hand. For those that may be new, I'll just give you a little bit of context. The first part of the data rubric is the scoring for the 616 portion. So that's sort of for all of your indicators. If everything was valid and reliable, et cetera, you get all ones. And then the second part is the 618 scoring of the rubric. And that is where you are scored on the timeliness, accuracy, and completeness of your initial 618 data submission. There are times, not often, but it does happen, where states look at that scoring and think, I think OSEP made a mistake. That should not be right. I got a 0 for timeliness. I know I turned in my submission on time, and this is sort of the evidence I have that I can share with you to indicate that. So if you feel that your 618 scoring is inaccurate, you will email PSC and let them know. The email is here, and you guys know it through all of the communications that come out through PSC. Sort of state your case, attach any evidence you have to substantiate what you're saying, and we will review it internally and see if a change in score is warranted. We don't notify you sort of before determinations that it's a yay or a nay. When we issue determinations and you look at your data rubric, then you will see if a score changed or not. And then when you have your determinations call with your state lead, you can talk that through. But I just wanted you to have a sense of the process if for some reason you looked at your rubric and you thought the 618 scoring was inaccurate. If for some reason you have questions about the 616 scoring on the rubric, which is the first section, then that's a conversation that you would be having with your state lead during the clarification period. Next, I want to talk about some sort of impressions we've had since we've been reviewing, places where you may see language that you might not have seen in such volume before, and then just sort of little things that we're seeing that I'm sure many people will be able to fix in clarification. So Swati, you can go to the next slide. So the first one is around baselines and targets. So because this is a new SPP APR package, obviously, all of you set targets for 6 years. FFY is 20 through 25, and you're reporting baseline data to us. So we've seen in a number of cases some internal inconsistencies in what states are reporting. So you have a screen grab here on the slide, but the historical data table where you indicate your baseline year and the baseline data are editable fields. So you type that in data entry. And like in the example here, state X said their baseline year for this indicator, which is indicator 1, part B is the example. Baseline year is 2020, and they entered the baseline data 71.69%. But if you see further down the SPP APR data table that shows your FFY 2020 data, there's a different percentage there. So because of that internal inconsistency, we will not accept baseline. And if we don't accept baseline, we cannot accept targets, because for us to ascertain that your end target reflects improvement over baseline, we have to know what your baseline is, and it has to be acceptable. So we've seen cases, I would say there are about three buckets, right? There is the states entered baseline year is 2020, baseline data, and it doesn't match what the FFY 2020 data is. Or maybe they picked a previous year, like FFY 19, and we go back and look at the 19 data, and that's not consistent. So we wouldn't accept. There are also times where states might have a baseline year, let's say of 2011, but then in the narrative, they tell us that they've revised their baseline to reflect 2019. That kind of inconsistency, again, we will not accept baseline. So I think they're easy fixes, but I just need you to be aware, if you open yours and you're like, oh my gosh, they didn't accept any of my baselines and then none of my targets, that it is tied to issues with discrepancies, or in some cases, states changed, revised their baselines and did not give us an explanation for that revision. And that's required. It's noted in the SPP APR instructions. So those are some of the areas where we're seeing some discrepancies with baseline data. In some cases, especially for indicator B1 and B2, if a state has picked a year prior to 2020, because the data source for that indicator now is exiting data, we wanted to see some language indicating that the state is revising baseline to reflect FFY19, and they use their exiting data to get that percentage. And we have gone back on our end and looked at the exiting data to make sure that that percentage is right. So just want you to be aware, if we can't accept baselines, we generally cannot accept targets. There are two exceptions to that, and that is natural environments for C2, because as we've said in our universal TA document, if a state's end target for C2 is 95%, we accept it even if it does not reflect improvement over baseline. And in the case of Part B, indicator 3A, participation on assessments, so long as states have end targets that hit 95%, we accept them even if they do not reflect improvement over baseline, because ESEA requires a 95% part rate. So outside of those two instances, if we didn't accept your baseline, we're also not accepting your targets. One other thing about this baseline piece, in small numbers, there were a few states for the baseline year that put like a school year. So like it says 2018-2019, that box, or they put FFY and wrote in those letters FFY 2020. That box only takes integers, and we just want you to identify the fiscal year. So 2020, no 2018-2019, just identify the fiscal year. I think that's it on baseline and targets generally. But if you have any further questions, or you see OSEP response and you're still confused, concerned, et cetera, your clarification call is a place to discuss it. We tried to be quite explicit on if it was a discrepancy, if it was, we didn't see an explanation for the revision, or if it was some other thing that led to us not accepting baselines. Next slide, Swati. So this one, I'm going to spend a little time here because it probably might cause the most angst for folks. Mentions a new package. We're analyzing quite closely because it is a new SPP APR package. Want to make sure we fully understand what states are reporting to us and that all of the data pieces are lining up nicely. So there are a few indicators where sampling is permitted in Part C, C4, Part B, 8 and 14. And there are some states that use a sampling plan to collect data for this indicator. There's a space in those indicators where you can indicate whether you use sampling, and then you tell us if it's a new sampling plan or previously approved. I would say, with the exception of one state that submitted a new one this year, vast majority of folks have said that it's a previously approved sampling plan. I think we've run into some issues where what a state has said has been on a previously approved sampling plan doesn't necessarily align with the information they give us in narrative around the methodology and how it yields valid and reliable results. So across the board, we made a decision that we need to see the approvable sampling plan that you are using to provide this data to us so that we can ensure consistency. So I say all that, and I don't want people to be like pulling out the hair. I know that there's been great turnover among staff, new people are here, et cetera. I want you to know your OSEP TA centers quite often have the longevity, history, and context. I would say reach out to them if, let's say, you're hunkering through filing cabinets and can't find yours or don't know where it is. I hope that that's not the case, but they can always provide some background info if you need it as well. But we do need to see those sampling plans. So in the clarification period, we would be looking for you guys to upload those in the system so that we're able to see them. I know that that's not anything in the past, we've just accepted year to year. Okay, it was previously approved, but like I said, this year there were some things we were seeing that raised some inconsistencies, and we just need to make sure that we have them all so that we can make the best decisions. And we're very clear on how the data you're submitting is consistent with those sampling plans. Next slide, Swati. So sometimes states resubmit their dispute resolution data in the reopen period in May. We don't usually have too many. I'd say it hovers around 7 or 8 each year. But if you are a state where your initial submission was not correct, or you have updated data that you need to resubmit, reopen period is in May, please make sure that you submit it during the reopen period. It does not get refreshed in the pre-filled cells in the system in EMAPS, but we do upload the revised version to EMAPS for you, and that's what will be posted with all of the other public documents that we post when we post the final docs, etc. And if you do have to resubmit dispute resolution data, please ensure that you indicate in narrative that you have resubmitted and how it differs from the data that's pre-filled. That's important from a transparency standpoint and for us to be able to have a thorough and accurate analysis. Next slide, Swati. The next two items are Part B related. One is tied to BRC. Assessment data. So I think last February, the acting assistant secretary at the time from OESE issued a letter talking about assessment flexibility in terms of administering assessments during the pandemic. And part of the flexibilities that were spoken about in that letter, it gave some examples, but just, talked about, some states may administer their assessment instead of the spring into the fall, et cetera. States were doing a number of things with the eye towards making sure that as many students as possible were able to take this assessment. So because of all of those fluctuations in assessment data being submitted, et cetera, and when assessments were administered, there were a number of states that did not submit in December and submitted in the resubmission period in March, which only just ended. Maybe the last day was March 30th or something around those lines. Those resubmitted data will be reflected in the system when clarification opens. We can't see it in OSEP on our end. So for any state that said they resubmitted, we've sort of said, okay, you've said you're going to resubmit. We will analyze it after the clarification period and then respond as needed. So we can't see it yet on our end in the system, but as soon as clarification opens, you'll be able to see it and then adjust your narrative to match what the resubmit. Another thing that will happen in the system when clarification opens, this was not a Part C issue, but it was a Part B issue. In the Part B system, the question about if a state revised or has a new theory of action, if a state checked no, it went on to the next question. But if they checked yes, then you would get this cascading question that would ask you to provide the link. We actually need everybody to provide the link for the theory of action. So when Part B clarification opens, you will see that space to provide your link. So if you see OSEP response saying, oh, the state did not provide their link, there'll be a space for you to provide it now, and that will take care of that. I will also say, as I mentioned in the beginning, so it was kind of different, probably challenging, but you guys did it, submitting your OSEP on February 1 with all of the other indicators. And so now we finally have every single indicator in the system, which is incredible. So as we're reviewing all of your data that's in the system, previously you had an attachment, maybe you would have some OSEP response, one line in the introduction, because we didn't have a space, it was no indicator in the system. And we'd say sort of, oh, thanks for your submission, et cetera. And a lot of the feedback came through the determination calls. Now that there is an indicator in the system coming in at the same time frame as all other indicators, we've reviewed it as we would all other indicators. So you might see OSEP response if we saw that there was something missing in what you reported. So some required element that is not there. If something is so vague that we can't figure out where it is or what it is, or if there are any internal inconsistencies, we would have OSEP response indicating that, as we would for any other indicator. So you can expect that as well. Next slide, Swati. So this is a Part B thing. For Part B, there was a change to the file specs that affect indicators 5 and 6 sort of quite clearly. And that was for indicator 5, including 5-year-olds in kindergarten in that file, and for indicator 6, excluding. And not everybody realized perhaps that in the instructions of indicator 9 and 10, it mentions that the analysis that states do, they have to be factoring in 5-year-olds who are enrolled in kindergarten in addition to the 6 through 21 age group. Because that's a change in methodology that affects the comparability of data, we would expect baselines to be revised. So many of you have language in there saying that we expect you to revise your baseline because now 5-year-olds are a part of that data set that you're analyzing generally to decide if you have disproportionate representation, this is a result of inappropriate identification, et cetera. So there's that. It's kind of like if you were around a few years ago when we made the change to indicator 4 in terms of if you exclude districts coming out of the numerator and denominator, then we expected you to revise baseline, same sort of principle. There's a change in how you're in the data source or the methodology, we expect that change. That's also reflected in our universal TA guidance document. So I just don't want you to be alarmed when you see it. I think the last big reminder is a Part C1. Swati, you can go to the next slide. It's around ICC forms. You have maybe, I don't know, 10, 12 states. We don't require a wet signature on your ICC form. You can go to the next slide, Swati. But it would have to at least be digital. So for us to accept it, digital or a wet signature, it's not acceptable to just type in a name to the form. So there are a few folks that are going to have to resubmit that form to us. So just know digital or wet signature acceptable, but we're not going to accept just a typed in name. Next slide, Swati. I think we just have 2 or 3 more. So you've seen your OSEP responses. You feel comfortable. You've addressed everything you need to address. You've had an incredible bang up clarification call or calls with your state lead. You're very clear on what needs to happen. You make all your revisions, ready to resubmit. Just remember there's a clarification change form that we're asking you to fill out. There's a naming convention on the slide that you can use. The form does not have to be 508 compliant because it's not posted publicly. It just helps target our review when you resubmit to us. Another thing to remember about the clarification period ending is that everyone still has to certify. So even if, let's say, you received our OSEP responses, you think there's nothing you need to change, no changes to be made here, you still have to certify to resubmit. So don't want you thinking you don't have to do anything, because you do still have to certify again and resubmit. Swati, I think the next slide is an example of the information that could be on a clarification change form, just really identifying the indicator and the description of the change. Just also please remember, if you write something on the clarification change form that you have changed, but it is not in the system, we can't accept the clarification change form. Your data are real and true, et cetera, in the system. So just make sure that what you reflect on the form, just telling us a brief outline of where you made changes and what those changes are, they need to be reflected in the system as well. And next slide is just a reminder about places where you can get resources and support. Obviously, contact PSC if you have technical questions, if you want to dispute your 618 data scoring or something else is amiss. There's also a slide, the next slide is for 508 resources if you need those. I'm grateful that the number of attachments has decreased immensely, because as I've shared in multiple places, multiple calls, for us to be in compliance with the Evidence Act, the department has to receive data and sort of display it and push it out in machine readable format. So when we get attachments, sort of our chief data officer is sort of starts breathing down my neck, because we're supposed to be getting data in machine readable formats, and EMAPS is an agency-wide system. So I know that the fact that we do not have rich text is, gives all of you agita. And we continue to put those enhancements down each year to think about what we might be able to do. As I've shared before, rich text and other things are security issues. And in a time of cybersecurity sensitivity, that's pretty important. We've tried to give you enough narrative boxes that you have space to give all the information you can, but it's important that the information is actually in the system, not in an attachment, unless it's an attachment that we require. And I think that's it. I could not read questions while I was talking. I cannot talk and type or talk and look, but if there are questions,
there are some questions. I can read them to you.
There are some questions.
Yes.
So wait. Let me look first. I'm gonna have to think. I won't be stumped. All right, no, go ahead. No, go ahead. I'll read them. Go ahead. You can read them.
Okay, the first question.
Guys, I'm sleep deprived.
Do we attach our clarification comments to the introduction again? And for C4B8, can our sampling plan be included as an attachment?
Yes. Your sampling plan most certainly can be included as an attachment. And what was the first part about? What was the first question?
Do we attach our clarification comments to the introduction?
Tell me the first part again, Al, sorry.
Do we attach our clarification comments to the introduction?
Sure, yes. Yes, you can attach your clarification change form there, sure.
Okay, next question. Where can we find the clarification?
Give me an easy one, Al. An easy one.
Yeah, this is an easy
one. Okay, let's.
This is an easy one. Where can we find the clarification changes form?
Wait, I missed one part of it.
Where can we find the clarification changes form? So the form we just you just talked about of.
It's on the grad site. It is also, although Diana, if you can find it and you can drop it in the chat for Swati, that's great. It should also, in the broadcast, they didn't have a link to it from PSC. Sorry, I'm asking y'all like y'all are right there and can respond to me. I thought that there might have been a link in the broadcast when they opened clarification, but perhaps not. It is posted on the grad site. I will make sure, Vanetta, thank you, dropped it in the chat for everyone. I told y'all that I worked with some incredible folks, they're on top of it. Thank you, Vanetta. All right, so sampling form. Sampling plan, attach it to the introduction. Yes, that's fine.
And who received the email regarding the opening of clarification?
Who the specific folks assigned in the system? Did you not, I guess if you're asking, you did not get information about it being opened. If you're a Part B person, it has not opened yet. Just give me time. It will come, but they usually go to the state director, Part C coordinator. Diana, you can help me out if you have that list in the top of your head. Oh, hold on. Let's see. Now I have my thing up. Yes, folks are indicating the clarification change form is attached, is included in the email from PSC. You also have the link where to find it. Where is our 618 scoring? I do not see it in EMAPS. It is on the data rubric. So you should have a data rubric attached to EMAPS if you're a Part C program, because you guys have clarification open, Part B does not. And once you open the data rubric and you scroll down, the 618 scoring is the second portion of it. If you still can't see it and you have a clarification call with your state lead, you can talk it through with them there, or just reach out to them if you're having trouble finding it, but it is on the data rubric. So you should have two attachments generally in EMAPS. There's from Ed, there's a dispute resolution attachment and there's a data rubric attachment. And my colleagues are putting the link for the clarification change form, the Part C and Part B1 in the chat. Someone asked if the sampling plan needs to be 508 compliant. No. Hopefully I don't have to come back and say something different, but I think it's most important for us that you get them in. We have not typically posted sampling plans before, even ones that we have gotten this year, well, the one we got last year, we do not post them publicly. So no, they do not need to be 508 compliant for us. However, if you're posting them on your websites, you would be following whatever rules exist there. But obviously, we're always in favor of accessibility.
And there's also a question, where is our 618 scoring? I didn't see it on EMAPS.
That's on the data rubric. So as I mentioned, you should have at least two Ed attachments in EMAPS. One is a dispute resolution document, which has your dispute resolution data that you would have submitted through EMAPS previously. The other one is the data rubric. So each state should have a data rubric attached in EMAPS for them. I think the bulk of the questions are around.
I think so. I'm not seeing any other
Clarification
questions.
change ones. I'm available if you have more questions.
We do have a hand raised from,
Yes, Swati, I see someone has their hand up. And then I see someone put in the chat that they do have a question. Just give it a minute.
Hi, this is Brandy from Idaho. Can you hear me?
Yes, Brandy, how are you?
Okay, I'm fine, thank you. Hopefully you guys are having some decent weather over there. I just had a quick comment, actually. One of the comments, I'm with Part C for Idaho, and just wanted to make a quick comment regarding the IDEA Part C SPP APR user guide did state to you didn't have to mention put in your FFY 20 targets if you're using this line. However, that was a comment, but I would mention that I'm not sure if you're aware that there's a little bit of an inconsistency there with that.
Brandy, you broke up, but I think I got the gist of it. You were saying
Okay.
the Part C SPP APR user guide says that you do not have to give targets for 2020.
So the guide specifically states that states can select the current year as an indicator's baseline year. If the baseline year is FFY 2020, do not enter a target for that year. However, that was an OSEP response, is that we didn't provide a target.
Yeah,
So I just thought I would mention that.
I'm glad you flagged that. I'm not sure I know the user guide you're speaking of. Which user guide? Is it something that is tied to the EMAP system, that stuff that PSC puts out, or is it, I am not
It
sure.
is
You
an
can drop it.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if you can still hear me. Hopefully I'm not breaking up anymore, but it's one out by Department of Ed, and it just says IDEA Part C, FFY 2020 SPP APR user guide. I'll see if I can get it in the thing for you guys.
And if you can't, Brandy, can you email it to me?
Yeah, sure.
I'm happy you told me about that inconsistency. I just want to make sure I know what document you're talking about, because it's not top of mind right now. But yes, everyone has to include targets for each of the years. That is correct. And it says so in the SPP APR instructions and the memo, because I'm looking at them right now.
on the measurement table, but it was just
So,
funny to read
so
through that.
it would be
and see that.
helpful, Brandy, if I could see that.
Sure.
Oh, so, okay, Laura dropped it in the
Thank you,
chat.
Laura.
So
Thank you.
it is
Yes, I see
something that is on the, see, aren't colleagues great? I will take a look and we will make sure that that is fixed. Thank you. And someone on the team, I know that somebody's taken a note so that when I get off this call and then go back into part B, that it doesn't fall off. So just keep that flag so we can fix that. But thank you so much. Because there were a number of states that didn't. And I wondered, I was like, how come we're not getting targets? But
We read the
easy
user
fix, right?
guide. We were
In the
being
grand scheme of
diligent.
fixing.
Yeah.
I know that
Thank you.
that I apparently did not know was there. Thank you. And
all
it's
good.
also
Yeah,
in the
thank
part
you.
B guide. Thanks for telling me. I always want you guys to tell us when you see an inconsistency, because that is very important to us and we want to make sure that we clear those up. So thank you for that. Are there any other questions? If they're not, our folks are thinking, oh, I'm going to say something to my part B colleagues for a minute. Any of you that are listening, so this is another error that I saw, but it wasn't like wide scale that I put it on a slide, but it's just in my mind at the moment. If for indicator 1, which is now exiting data, you chose a baseline, I don't know, prior to 2020 or something. Let's say you put in FFY 19 or 18. Just remember that it's lag data for that indicator. So the year you put in for your baseline year, let's say you put in 18, that means it's FFY 18, which means it's school year 17-18. And I think some of the discrepancies we caught there too were, I don't know if it was, just sort of, it's hard to get your mind wrapped around lag data that the year you put, it's actually talking about data from the previous year. So just keep that in mind. But, ask us questions during the clarification period if you're like totally confused about what's happening there. All right, and all you guys are, Kat posted it. Kat, thank you. Hone in there on the page so we don't have, yes, thank you. So we don't have to search and find it. Those who work most closely with me know how inconsistencies make me sweat. So I'm probably breaking out in hives and y'all can't see me right now, but I'm grateful that we'll be able to fix this. Barb in Delaware, you're asking if it's going to come later this evening. Yes, Barb, it should come later this evening. I don't know how late, but it will be later. Yes. Not through lack of effort though. I mean, like in a perfect world, my will and desire would have been that you guys got them at 8 o'clock this morning, but that was not to be, but they're coming. And I know it's hard, like people are, might be taking leave or depending on what holiday they celebrate this weekend and stuff. So I know it is hard. And that's why we certainly make it 2 weeks so that folks have enough time that they could actually have a life in addition to responding to our comments, but no problem, Barb. Also on those clarification calls, sorry, I'm like a squirrel, shiny things. Access your TA providers, they are incredible resources for many, many things, but also being on clarification calls with you. So if you are working with one of our OSEP funded TA centers and your liaison is available, I encourage you to have them on your clarification calls as well. It's always nice to have another set of ears hearing the information, and they can support you through that resubmission period. I don't see any new questions in the Q&A chat. I think we answered the bulk of them already live. See, Rory put out there for everyone. Hope you guys see it. Letting you know exactly all of the roles that your TA providers can fill. They are incredible. So Swati, I don't know. I don't think anyone has their hand up. I thought you guys were going to have way more questions for me, quite honestly, but I'm grateful nonetheless.
Had another one pop up in the Q&A.
In the Q&A, okay, hold on. Oh, by fixing the 2020 baseline issue, do I mean changing the document, meaning the user guide that y'all are telling me gives you incorrect information, or telling states that they do not have to report them at all? It is definitely not telling states they do not have to report them at all. It's in our SPP APR memo and instructions that states have to give us targets. Sorry, I'm looking away because I'm looking in the document for all of the years that cover the SPP APR. So FFYs 20 through 25. So we will change it on that user guide. And we probably need to spend a little time going back through the entire user guide to make sure that there are no other inconsistencies there in that document that's posted on grads. And Rainey said they'll have questions after you see. I'm sure you will. I'm sure you'll have lots of questions then. When are we going to find out about allocations for states? I'm going to let Al answer that. I'm only answering SPP APR related questions today. Al,
We are
filling in
still,
for Greg. You can
yes, we're still working
can
on
take
the
that one.
allocation table, but right now you should use last year's allocation, but as soon as it is finalized, we will get it out to you. So that should be coming out soon. With that, I would say, I don't want to estimate because I don't want to be off, but we'll get it out to you as soon as possible, but it's not available yet.
Al, Kat said she had a dream it was June 20th.
We will do it as soon as possible.
That's funny. I had a dream about data rubrics last month. So I understand dreaming about work-related things.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Well, all of you know where to find me. You know your state leads are incredible resources. You know your TA providers are also incredible resources, albeit a different type of support. But we're here to help you. Reminders to make sure that you certify. Don't forget certify, because you have to certify even if you change nothing. So just don't forget that step as you look towards the end of clarification.
Well, without any additional questions or comments, thank you for attending today's monthly TA call. Our next call will be on Thursday, April 28th at 4 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.